By Dick Dyer, Mercedes-Benz, the first Mercedes-Benz in South.
Hey, we're the Call Guys. I'm David,
And I'm George.
and we are back today with a returning guest, Kristian Niemi. Kristian, welcome back aboard.
It's good to be back.
Hey, listen, you were such a great guest earlier, and George and I just, felt like we walked out of a master class at Darla School of Business on entrepreneurship and business that day. So, but we're welcome to have you back because we wanted to dive into something we really didn't talk about the last time. And it's an event that's coming up in just a few short weeks here in Columbia, your Great American Whiskey Fest.
Yeah. Friday, October 4th at 701 Whaley.
Nice.
Could you break down and give us a little bit of an intro to what all goes into the festival, where it's located, and just a little background on the festival itself?
Sure. So the Great American Whiskey Fair started in the fall of 2013. We were under construction at Bourbon and we're researching bourbons, whiskeys in general, and we went to one of the larger whiskey shows out in San Francisco, and we're very underwhelmed by it. And on the flight back, I was just like, this is something we should do. I can't think of another big whiskey show in the Southeast, so let's just do it ourselves. And so in the fall of 2013, we launched the Great American Whiskey Fair, and we had about, 50 distilleries, 50, 60 distilleries, and about 400 guests show up, 400 guests. And it was right from the start, it was like, we're onto something here. This looks like it's going to be it could be something we do every year. And we're now entering our 12th year of it. So it's been great. It is the largest whiskey show in the Southeast, as far as we know, especially if you consider the number of whiskeys available and the number of distilleries that participate in it. So right now we're at well over 100 distilleries and well over 300, sometimes over 350 whiskeys.
Yeah, so it seems like the success of your festival has kind of followed the rise in popularity of bourbon and craft bourbon and all these small breweries opening up all over the Southeast. Kind of, you own Bourbon on Main Street. Was that, was bourbon itself an interest that drove you to open the bar, that drove you to, into this festival?
Yeah, so my love of bourbon started probably back in the late 80s. When Jim Beam came out with 4 products, and it was I don't want to say in response, but it was a concerted effort to show the world that American whiskeys were made with the same quality and should be on par with the great whiskeys of Europe, especially Scotland. And so in the late 80s, Jim Beam introduced Booker's, Baker's, Knob Creek, and Basil Hayden. And those were all what you would consider craft bourbons at the time. And when I say in response to, it was Blanton's was out at the time, and Blanton's was finally being recognized as one of the finest whiskeys in the world. And all these master distillers, you have to remember that all these guys knew each other. They all grew up together. They all hung out together. They'd sip whiskey on each other's porches. It's a tight knit community, especially back then when there were much fewer distilleries making world-class bourbon at the time, and they're all within spitting distance of one another. So and if you look back at the names behind a lot of these distilleries, at some point they all go back to the same families. So that's when kind of my love of bourbon began. I remember a Jim Beam representative coming to one of the restaurants I worked at when I was in Minneapolis and giving me a little sampler of those 4 whiskeys, and I remember just being blown away by the quality of them. I already knew about Blanton's because the chef that I worked with at the Dakota was also, a connoisseur of a lot of things, and he introduced me to Blanton's. And so, so many years later, when the thought of bourbon came around, now I had never thought of opening a whiskey bar. And like I told you in the last podcast we did, that was just fortuitous that it happened to be the Brennan building, constructed in 1869 on Main Street, that kind of bumped that to the top of my head and was just like, yeah, I'm going to open up a whiskey bar. So, in 2013, when we started construction on it, bourbon that wave was just really starting to grow. I remember there were a few people that said that there's no way a whiskey bar was going to work on Main Street. And, thankfully it did. But so starting that and the whiskey fair at the same time just kind of seemed like a natural fit. Besides, when you're in construction of a restaurant that you think is going to open in, 90 days, and really it's going to be 180 days before it's finished, you got to find something to do with yourself while the contractors are working on it. So it was literally a situation where it starting the whiskey fair checked a lot of boxes off of my things to do list, which is research bourbons that we want to put on the list, taste them, get to know the people behind the brands, both the local reps, the regional reps, the national reps, the master distillers, get to know all of them and begin a relationship with them, so that leading forward, as we grew the bar and the event, we'd have contact list deep in the heart of whiskey country. So so that's kind of a latent hibernating love of bourbon is kind of what spurred both of the events on, both the restaurant and the event.
Awesome. And on the topic of the event getting started and figuring out this was something that you were interested in holding, what were some of the challenges you faced that first time organizing the festival? And then in addition to that, how did you get these different bourbon brands to come on and say that, yes, they would be willing to be a sponsor in the festival?
Well, I didn't really have a lot of challenges getting this started because my business partner, Vanessa with F2T Productions, this is kind of, putting on events like this is what she does. And so my kind of Mickey Rooney sort of attitude of let's put on a show is grounded in her absolute ability to actually execute that. So once I came up with the idea of it and everything and started reaching out to the local reps and stuff about the whiskey show, she's the one that actually put it into motion by organizing it and making sure that what I was thinking was actually getting accomplished. So without her, it would not exist. But there really weren't any challenges to it because, it's like any trade show. Every trade needs an opportunity to show their wares to the public. And if you can put on a show that allows these companies to direct market to the consumers that are very, very passionate about it, they're all in. They can't do it. One brand alone can maybe do a tasting at a liquor store or something like that, or maybe do a dinner somewhere, but that's just their brand. So to put together an event that all were welcome to show their wares and guarantee them a demographic of very interested and passionate consumers, they all signed on right away. So it hasn't been that difficult to get them interested in the participating in the whiskey fair. So we've been very fortunate in that. There really, I'll be honest, there really haven't been a lot of There haven't been a lot of challenges. Echo, please. There haven't. I'm not at the restaurant right now, by the way. I'm at home. Yeah, there haven't been a lot of challenges. The biggest challenge I say is making sure that each year it's as good, if not better, than the year prior, and making sure that new brands that come out, which are coming out on almost a monthly, weekly basis, that they're represented there. So every year there are a pretty big handful of brand new whiskeys for people to try. So even if you've gone last year or a few years ago and haven't been back to it since, there are going to be a lot of brands that you can taste that weren't even in the market at that time. So that's an exciting part of it. Every year I get to walk around and see brands that I had never seen before. So that's cool.
Yeah. So walk us through like what an average attendee experience is when they come to the festival. So, I've never been. I'm going to try and be down there, this week, this coming year to check it out. What am I expecting to have as an experience there? What's there for me to do?
So as soon as you walk in the door, you're given your glass, your map of the area, and then from there, it's literally just a sea of distributors, distillers, brands from around the world, and you can make a plan by looking at the map ahead of time of like who you want to taste right away or who you don't. Who you want to. If you want to map it out in a certain way, you can. I find that what I have a tendency to do, I'm usually too busy, but I always make a point of taking a look at the map ahead of time. They're posted around the area and you can kind of look to see where people are and choose ones that you're interested in. But what ends up happening is you look at the map and you like, I've never heard of this one. I've never heard of that one. And so you end up heading to those tables. And before you know it, you're basically just working your way around the whole 701 Whaley, trying to, just tasting things at each one. I'm a little more discerning as to how I do it, in that I don't tend to taste flavored whiskeys until after I've tried everything else, and then I'll try some of the flavored whiskeys. It's a segment of whiskeys that I feel like can mess up your palate if you do it ahead of time, because a lot of them will contain sugar in them and flavorings, and so I usually will stay away from those at the beginning. But then I always come back and hit them, because I have to say there's a lot of tasty flavored ones out there that I don't look at as like a traditional whiskey. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around, but like flavored vodkas, there's a lot of really delicious ones, and so I just kind of have to let go of my idea of that whiskey is bigger than just straight whiskeys. So, but then also while you're there, you have the opportunity. So there's a meal included with it, because we want to make sure people get something in their stomachs, and so we smoke a lot of heritage hog, barbecue with sides. So at any moment you can step out, go over to the what we call the market building. It's and have a meal. On your way there, you'll hit the Wild Turkey Stony Creek cigar veranda. So there's hand rolled cigars, and yeah, it's a really good time. And then at the end of the event, with about less than an hour or about an hour left, we'll start the Great American Whiskey Fair cocktail competition. So we usually have 3 to 4 bartenders from around the state competing against one another for the best cocktail of the year. So this year we have every year we bring back the returning champion from the year before to compete. They're an automatic buy into it, and then we get 2 or 3 others from around the state to compete against them. So that's a kind of a fun way to finish up the evening. And then at 8:30 we let everybody go home, and I always do recommend that people take an Uber to the event or have a designated driver to come pick them up, because you're talking about over 300 whiskeys. And, although we limit it to a 1/4 ounce pour, that can add up pretty quickly if you're tasting a lot of things. So
Yeah.
I always like to say in the email that goes out to all attendees, it's a tasting, not a drinking.
Yeah. Well, and you guys provide like a designated driver ticket too. So if somebody wanted to
Correct.
bring a buddy
Yeah.
that wanted to go but not drink, which is, incredibly responsible. But I'm curious, what was last year's cocktail that won the competition?
They all blend together, but I know it was a gentleman from Whiskey Alley and Aiken that won, and he'll be returning back to hold on to his title. So we've had a couple bartenders from around the state that have been multiple time winners. Craig Nelson was a 2-time winner from Proof out of Charleston. First 2 years he won. And let's see, we've had, and then I think after that we've had different winners almost every year after that. And it's really fun because we've had years where second place only lost by literally 1 or 2 points, and it's on a 100 point judging system. We get four impartial judges, so they either come from the distilleries or the representatives or brand ambassadors or whiskey celebrities. We have a food writer. We have a whiskey writer that comes from comes down from Greenville every year and is has been one of the judges for about 3 or 4 years. And we've got another YouTube social media whiskey influencer. He comes down from North Carolina, and he was with us last year as one of the judges. We've had Eddie Russell, the master distiller at Wild Turkey. We've had a lot of master distillers actually over the years that will sit in. Last year we had the mayor of Columbia sit in because he's also affiliated with a phenomenal whiskey called Forbidden, and so he got to sit in. So during the cocktail competition, the bartenders are not aware of what type of whiskey, what brand of whiskey they're using. We keep it non-brand specific. It's a high proof bourbon or a high proof rye. Those are their choices to make their cocktails from, so that it's not tied to any particular brand.
Nice. So what are the demographics around this? Like it
looks like
where
us.
Is this? It looks like us.
It looks like us. It's a bunch of guys,
Okay.
but I will say this.
I mean, in terms of age-wise, is it, has it come up with any specific generation, or is it just, kind of widespread interest dependent on the person?
It's really widespread, really widespread. So there's a lot of guys that are in their late 20s, up to a lot of guys in their late 60s, early 70s, everything in between. But I will say that there have been a lot more women attending over the past few years than ever before. There's been a definite increase in the interest among women in bourbon also. So that's been really good to see. The first couple of years was really kind of, for lack of better words, a sausage fest, but it's now become a lot more of a broad demographic, both like I said, men, women. Men are definitely still the biggest bourbon consumers, and they have the most interest in it. But the amount of women showing up to the event has definitely increased, probably 3-4-fold over the past few years.
So with all of the events attendance increasing with both women and men, it's kind of been seen in the industry as a whole as bourbon has taken off. Do you think it's sustainable long term? And also how has the popularity of bourbon impacted the festival in a positive way?
Well, yeah, it's obviously affected in a positive way over the years. I mean, there's more and more people that come up to me and pull out their cell phone or like, hey, check out my bourbon collection. But it's not, is it sustainable? When you look at that arc of how bourbon has taken off, nothing is sustainable at that arc. I mean, I don't see the sheer volume and number of distilleries that pop up every single year, I just don't see how that's sustainable. I think you'll have, in the next few years, there'll be kind of a shakeout of some of the ones that just cannot keep up, or they'll get bought up by the bigger brands or something like that. But I feel like we've, I don't know if I shouldn't say that we have reached peak bourbon, but I think for it to stay, it'll stay popular. There's no doubt about that. I find that, here's the thing: whiskeys in general are such a huge segment of spirits. So, you've got, bourbon, you've got rye, you've got American whiskeys, you've got Scotch, you've got Irish whiskeys, you've got Canadian whiskeys, Japanese whiskeys, whiskeys from India, Tasmania. I mean, you've got big distillers, you've got little tiny micro distillers, you've got everything in between. So it's a huge segment. And it's far more interesting than most other spirits. So it will continue to grow. I don't think you'll see the stratospheric growth that we've seen over the past 10 years. I think that's going to start to settle down a little bit, and you're going to see a little bit slower growth in the market as far as bourbon goes. But I think the wonderful thing about it is that a lot of these little distilleries that were just starting when we began both the restaurant and the whiskey fair, is that a lot of these have now been around long enough to have whiskeys that are aged, 7-10 years. I mean, we're in our 12th year of the whiskey fair, and so we've seen some of these little tiny brands that started with whiskeys that, they could call it bourbon, but they had to put an age statement on the side of it because it was less than 4 years old. Now they're coming to market. They're coming to these events with 7-year-old expressions, 9-year-old expressions, even 10-year-old expressions, and that's exciting. So, the quality of the bourbon is getting better because a lot of these guys have been in the market long enough. So you're seeing less. You're seeing less bourbons popping up that are just simply purchasing bourbon and putting it in their own bottle. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because like a lot of the bourbons that get purchased from, say, the big distiller like MGP or something like that, what they do with it, what these little companies do with it after the fact, if they go into a secondary aging sort of thing, or if they just or a secondary finishing, they're doing a lot of really interesting things with really good juice that's coming out of MGP. And so, it's exciting. And I don't think it is sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable at the level that we've seen over the past few years.
So, Kristian, again, it just sounds like you stepped into an arena that just you really made a lot of hay with. You're an incredible entrepreneur. You're an incredible ambassador for the city of Columbia. So, again, why don't you kind of run through for our listeners, kind of the dates, the times, how they can get tickets if they're still available, so that they can come down and, enjoy this event that you've put so much time and effort and love into.
Cool. Yeah. So it's the Great American Whiskey Fair. It's in its 12th year. It's held every year at 701 Whaley, and tickets are available. VIP is sold out, but general admission is still available, and it's $90. The question I was like, well, if you pay the $90, do I have to then pay for tastings? No, that covers all of it. That covers the meal. That covers your commemorative glass. It covers your ability to taste all of the whiskeys there. I don't recommend it, but taste all the whiskeys that you'd like. The doors open at 5:30 for general admission. It goes for 3 hours. We kind of keep it at 3 hours because anything longer than that, it could get a little sloppy. We have Columbia's finest on hand with us to help you make sure that you make it home safely. I definitely recommend taking an Uber to and from the event. Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of my favorite events that Columbia has. It's been recognized as such in a lot of magazines and by a lot of whiskey writers around the nation. So we're proud of that. We get you'll get to meet a lot of great people, and it's a lot of fun because you're there with like-minded people. I mean, if you're there to if you're into whiskey, you can't be in a better place than a whiskey show with 800 other whiskey lovers. So the conversations that I get to hear while I'm there walking around in my big dumb bottle suit is a blast, because you hear people exchanging numbers. They're like, "Hey, yeah, I'd like you to join my little whiskey club. Oh yeah, you should come over to my whiskey club. We're gonna do this and check this out." And so yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a blast. So I highly recommend it. You can go to f2tproductions.com and just look under events, or you can go to Great American Whiskey Fair. Well, wait, no, I don't think that website's live yet. Our first website is experiencewhiskey.com. We're in the process of, we obtained Great American Whiskey Fair also, and everything is going to go onto that next year. So, but for now, it's experiencewhiskey.com or f2tproductions.com to get tickets.
Awesome. Well, Kristian, again, just, thank you so much for being here with us, joining us back on the Cola Guys to
Anytime.
talk about yet another thing that you do. Love hanging out at Bourbon when we get a chance. Well, I do. George can't. But thanks again. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And, have a great festival.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Is sponsored by Bell Carrington, Price and Gregg. Bell Carrington is our choice for the best real estate attorneys in town. They are highly communicative and make sure that the closing process is as smooth as possible. With offices in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, they can handle any of your real estate, finance, eminent domain, financial services litigation, and litigation needs. Call their Columbia SC office today at 803-509-5078.